The following program is brought to you by the University of Alabama.
With her first novel, The Well and the Mine, set in Carbon Hill, Alabama in 1931, author Gin Phillips won the Barnes & Noble Discover Award for Best First Fiction. It was surely tempting for her to set her second novel in a mining town in Alabama. Her publishers would have loved it. But Come In and Cover Me, her new novel, is the story of an archaeologist working in New Mexico among Indian ruins in the 21st century. I spoke with Gin Phillips in our studio in Reese Phifer Hall on the campus of the University of Alabama. Gin, thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
It's nice to see you. We've been meeting from time to time at various events and planning to do this, but now after a couple of years of thinking about it, we're finally at it. You're now the author of two published books, The Well and the Mine and Come In and Cover Me. The first one, the first thing a person sees when that reader picks up The Well and the Mine is that there's a foreword, an introduction by Fannie Flagg, author of Fried Green Tomatoes. How in the world did that come about?
Well, as it came about through some luck and through Fannie Flagg being very kind to other people from Alabama. My first publishers were very emphatic that it's a big deal to get some sort of introduction. Otherwise, your book gets lost in the slush pile of first books. And I happened to mention when we were trying to come up with someone that I had met Fannie Flagg once in college at Birmingham Southern. They used to do a gala for important women, and they'd pair up senior women at Southern with the honorees. So I'd been begging for about 6 months before they arrived to please get Fannie Flagg. There's also Linda Carter that year who said the fact that I wanted Fannie Flagg more than Wonder Woman really impressed them, I think. But I got
I'm sure Fannie Flagg liked it too.
Hopefully, I hope she realized the priority that gave her. But so I got to spend the day showing her around campus and chatting a little bit. And so then fast forward, I guess, maybe 8-9 years when I was trying to get The Well and the Mine out, and we tracked down her agent and mentioned that I'd met her once before, and she was very kind to say that she remembered me. I'm still not sure that she did, but regardless, that she sent back a fax after we made the request that said, we Alabamians have to stick together. I'll be happy to do it. So it was very nice and made a big difference, I think, in the book coming out.
It is a nice little introduction. You were then, therefore, you were senior, you were a student at Birmingham Southern. Are you a Birmingham person?
I grew up in Montgomery. I went to high school in Montgomery at Lamp at Sidney Lanier, and then I went to Birmingham Southern. And then after Birmingham Southern, spent the year out of the country. I actually had a fellowship to study women's religious orders and social activism. So I studied Catholic nuns in Ireland and Buddhist nuns in Thailand for a year. It was a fantastic year. The Thailand part didn't really come together that well, so I did some elephant safaris and learned Thai massage. But it was a great year bouncing around doing odd things.
Well, under whose auspices did you do this? Was it a Fulbright? What was it?
It's called the Watson Foundation. It's from the founder of IBM, who apparently spent a year out of the country after college, decided everyone should spend a year out of the country after college. So those are the terms. You pick a subject, you stay away for a year.
Right.
They give you some money. You don't have to write anything. You don't have to give a speech, nothing. You just head out and live with nuns.
All right, that would not have been my first choice, but it seems to have worked for you. You're raised in Montgomery, educated in Birmingham, but you set your first novel in Carbon Hill. Mm-hmm. Do you have family connections up in Carbon Hill?
My grandmother and her 3 siblings grew up in Carbon Hill, so they're actually a little suburb of Carbon Hill, but they were about the same ages as the Moore children. In 1931, they would have been in their elementary school, middle school age. My great aunt still lives in the house that my great grandfather built up there. So and that house is the Moore house in the book. So I set the story in a place where I had a pretty concrete connection and a pretty concrete sense of place. My great grandfather was also a coal miner, so there are a few parallels.
I was looking at the back matter in The Well and the Mine, and you read a lot of books on mining,
right?
And coal mining in particular, and you set that book at 1931.
Mm-hmm.
Did you go back? Did you wander around? Did you do research with your shoes as well as in the Birmingham Public Library?
Sure, I did a lot of my research. Well, I did plenty of library research. I did a lot of the fancy word is oral history. The normal words are talking to my family.
Yeah.
But did a lot of just talking to my grandmother and her siblings, asking them over and over, just tell me stories. Tell me about, do I remember a story about this at Christmas? Or, and they were, live people are such a richer resource, or just an easier resource, frankly, than books at times, because I want to set this scene. I want Lita to wake up in the morning, and that unleashes a whole flurry of questions that I can sit down and ask my grandmother. Okay, so when you went to sleep, what was your nightgown like? Do you wear your hair in a braid, or would you take your braid down at night? When you get up in the morning, do you go out to the outhouse to pee first, or do you start the fire first, or do you go feed the animals? How long does it take the water to boil? Or would you put shoes on? And that kind of thing that could take me, years to track down. With great confidence in books, they were able to really put together and give me the real sights and smells, and what it smelled like when you polished the floors, or what your hands felt like after you milked a cow.
Right.
Those kind of things they were really invaluable with.
Well, people who've written about that book always praised the details, the verisimilitude, the food, and the language. I mean, that language. There's always this talk about how the South, one day soon, if not already, will sound just like the rest of the country. That's just not true. And
Right.
It's not true in Carbon Hill anyway, is it?
No, I get a lot of questions of sort of, how did you, so you weren't born in 1931, how do you know how people talk? And I keep saying, well, because I go up to Carbon Hill now, and that's still how they talk. Not everyone, but my family has a lot of the same phrasings they grew up with. My older relatives still have a real clear sense of clear idiom that's really specific to rural Alabama, different than how my friends talk growing up in Montgomery, say. And I did try to sort of cull out some of my favorite phrases and
Sure.
use the ones I liked the most and had never heard anywhere else.
Well, you've got this nice little family, and it was so refreshing that the father was not abusive to the mother, and no one was actually starving inside the house. That was because they owned a piece of land. I thought that was a distinction that ran through the whole book that really mattered. The poor people who worked in the mines, and their whole income was their weekly pay envelope.
Mm-hmm.
They had problems. That was hard.
Right.
But your family owns a tiny farm.
Right. Yeah. There's, I think there's a lot of references to economics, to finance there, and just those what seem like very small differences that made a huge difference in terms of quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, owning land is one of those. That sense of you having some freedom and some independence.
Well, they grew vegetables. They had fruit trees. They had a cow.
Right. They had an ability. Yeah, they were outside of the mining powerhouse, which really locked down on most of the other people. You mentioned, and you mentioned that the father wasn't abusive. That there's not.
They're good people.
Yeah, I have. I think that's one of my. Something that was really important to me in writing the book was one, to confront racism, to acknowledge the racism that was there, but to also be aware that that part of what made systemic racism so evil was you didn't have to be an evil person to be a part of it. That the problem was you had good people who were kind, who were good to their family, who meant well, who were also totally caught up in that system. So you got to like the Moors to really appreciate the evil of the system that they're caught up in.
Well, Albert, the dad, is well known in the community as being a very generous man. And when somebody comes up to his door hungry, they always get something to eat. But in the novel, he even tries to make baby steps towards integration.
Right.
He invites his friend, his black friend, Jonah, from the mines, to come to supper. Mm-hmm. It can't be, can it?
Right. And that's from a real. My great grandfather, as I said, was a miner, and a couple of the anecdotes from that story from the book about say his kids getting in trouble for saying "ma'am" and "sir" to black
Sure.
maids, to black servants, are from real life. That story, one of my relatives had told a story about her father. These are more distant relatives, asking a black man who worked to him to come in for coffee, or to come in for breakfast, excuse me. Mm-hmm. And he wouldn't, and they settled on coffee on the front porch. And that's another one of those things that seems like such a fine line that there was nothing fine or detailed about it at the time. That for Albert, the idea of supper versus coffee, of kind of how baby can those steps be and still make some overture.
What I remember is that they were the reason Jonah was willing. I mean, he was a little savvier than Albert. Black fellow
Right.
knew this is trouble.
Right.
This could go wrong.
Right, because he's the one who would pay the price much more than Albert
mostly,
would.
right. But they could have the coffee on the porch.
Right.
The two of them could sit on the porch and drink coffee. And even if people came by and saw it, it's just the porch.
Right.
Which is much different from the dinner table.
From inside the house. Yeah, it's Albert is somebody in the book who always, as one of the kids says, who wants to believe good and bad are very clear-cut things. You know the right thing, you can do it. And that's his struggle for the book, is coming to terms with maybe you do know the right thing, maybe you don't, but even if you know it, maybe it's a little more complicated than you think to figure out how to get there.
And it's risky. It's difficult. I was pleased that your people in the book are fans of John L. Lewis and Roosevelt and the United Mine Workers, the last Democrats.
Right. Yeah, I love.
Were the miners at Carbon Hill pro-union?
Oh yes,
were
they were pro-union. They had it beaten out of them a lot of by 31. There had been a real backlash. But that's another thing I loved about my older relatives is the sense of, although there is absolutely nothing about them that you would consider progressive or liberal now,
right?
That they were still diehard Democrats. That they. I just love that you've got a rural Alabama woman in, say, her late 70s at the time who's swearing Clinton never did anything with that woman. There's no way. And I'd say he actually has admitted that he did. You know that, right? And she said, no, he didn't. He didn't. They made him say that. Like, wow, that is a yellow dog Democrat.
That's loyal.
That's downright delusional. But yeah, they still through the 90s and the 2000s have this still intense loyalty to the New Deal, to Roosevelt, to the fact that the Democrats came in and saved them.
Your book begins oddly, in an unusual fashion. Little Tess, who is I think 10 or something, she's sitting on the back porch in the dark. Their well, the well of the title, is essentially on their back porch. And a woman comes by. This is page 1, so there's no alert of any kind. It's the first page. A woman comes by and drops a baby in the well, and that begins the action. For a long time, the book is about who dropped the baby in the well,
right,
and why.
Right.
And this is finally discovered, and we don't have to say who did it. But something that interested me about the structure of the book was that I found myself becoming less and less concerned about who dropped the baby in the well and why, as the book moved into the two girls growing up and brother being hit by the brick truck and social conditions.
Right.
When you were writing along, did you get the sense that you were leaving the baby behind, so to speak?
Well, I guess in some ways I knew the baby was a bit of a cheat in the first place. I am aware that I am plot is not what interests me most, that I'm always
Right.
tied up in my characters. And yet, it took me a long time to realize this, but if you just have interesting characters sitting on the couch doing nothing for a whole book, nobody actually wants to read it. People kind of like a plot and something to happen. So in some ways, the setup is a way to jumpstart what's ultimately about, about the arc that each character has, where
Right.
they start out in the beginning, what they learn over the course of the book, and how they change. So I was aware I was leaving the baby out of it a little bit, but was, I'm counting on what you're talking about, that you hopefully start reading and are curious about the baby, and then get to know these people and realize the story's a lot broader than the baby.
But it also, it does energize Tess and Virgie. Since those two girls want to know who did it,
Right.
they start moving around in the
Right.
community, kind of sleuthing
Right.
as they understand it. At the brush arbor service, they get clues. They go to people's houses and ask, "Are all your babies okay?"
Right, they're not real subtle.
No, they're not. But they're only little.
And they start to realize, in the process, they start to learn more about the world around them. I mean, one thing I liked about the idea of this mysterious woman who throws a baby down the well is you start out with this idea of someone who is irredeemably evil.
Yes.
And everyone dismisses her, and then to spend the rest of the book really complicating that in the way that life becomes complicated as you grow up, as these little girls are realizing it's not quite what they thought. People aren't quite what they thought.
Yeah. Well, the temptation for you when you finish that book, and the pressure from any agent or publisher, would have been the mine and the well and the mine too,
Right?
or something like that.
People love sequels.
But you didn't. I mean, your second book, Come In and Cover Me, you have a 37-year, instead of these people who are, well, the children do get educated at the end of that book, but you have a PhD. Wren is a 37-year-old woman, archaeologist, PhD, works in New Mexico, unearthing Indian Pueblo artifacts. Now, unless you have grandmothers who are also New Mexican archaeologists, you must have done a good deal of research on that.
Yes, and that is, that's one of the great gifts of people paying you to make up stories, I think, is not only you get to write, you get to pick a topic that's interesting and dive in. I've always liked the idea of archaeology. I'm moronic at science, so it was never a very good career choice, but it's always been really interesting to me, the idea of people spending their whole lives reconstructing the lives of those who came before them. It's not that different from writing fiction in some ways. And I'd had this idea of wanting to do something about archaeology. And then several years ago, my best friend called me. She had a boyfriend in college who had died while he was in college, and she'd found a mixtape he made her back in high school, the way we used to show our love for each other before iTunes. And she was just amazed at having found this tape in his handwriting and all these songs he'd chosen, and said, "Isn't it amazing that a piece of plastic can last longer than a human being?" And I loved that line, and it really clicked as soon as I hung up, the idea of maybe why you choose to be an archaeologist, maybe what draws you to the past is a desire to recapture your own past. Maybe you've had this loss, and you're trying to get back to where you were before the loss. And that is, for Wren, a lot of what drives her. She lost a brother, and she lost a whole way of life.
Well, she lost the brother, which was careless of her, but he's not gone for very long at a time. This book, Wren is a highly trained and successful, legitimate archaeologist, but in a kind of funny way. I can't say she cheats. That'd be wrong. But she has tools at her disposal that other people don't have. When she's out on the site, sometimes she's famous particularly for having discovered some intact, beautiful bowls, and they have natural designs on them, pictures of parrots and other birds and animals. But the heart of your book is that every once in a while, the 12th century potter woman appears to her as if she goes back in time, and then sometimes the 12th century potter woman and her mentor appear in the 21st century.
To no one but Wren.
Just to her. Well, they are like ghosts. Are they Hamlet's ghost? Are they Henry James's ghosts from the turn of the screw? Are the ghosts real, or are they a figment of her imagination?
I will say I love magical realism. I love Toni Morrison and Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and so that's what drew me to the ghost, is the idea of, those you lose are still with you. Well, what if they're really with you? Or what if, how much can we play with this? Yeah, I think there's always the question in the book. Silas kind of pushes it of just, is Wren very creative, and these are her imaginings? Is she a little bit crazy, or are they real ghosts? And I think everybody can get a different answer to that. But I like the idea that they are actually there, that there is some connection, that that it may, in a way, it is cheating, although it's also her own desperate need. She's not very good at connecting to people who are actually alive and next to her, that her connections reach across much broader distances, and she's got this sort of desperation to get to know these people, to be able to bring them back.
Well, she's a very attractive woman. She's bright and she's good looking, and I guess you would say she was attractive in general. But she really cannot sustain a relationship with a man. In fact, she's it says she chews them up and spits them out.
Right.
And this is partly because, these ghosts, which have been such an advantage to these, especially the American Indian ghosts, the Native Americans. Her brother appears a lot, but that's a kind of family trauma which most people can understand.
Right.
The Indians are something a little more removed. But these ghosts are the very thing that keep her, tell me if I'm understanding this right, those Native American Potter women are keeping her from a satisfactory relationship with a grown man.
Right.
Why?
Yeah, I think there's
Why is that necessary?
Oh, I don't know that it's necessary, and it may not be necessary with actual ghosts. I do think for her, and for plenty of people who are still sort of caught up in their own traumas and past, that she does have to move forward. She's got to let go of the little girl that she was and the brother who she lost, and not give them up entirely, but let go of the sort of anger and despair and sadness to be able to move forward and connect enough to have a real relationship.
She seems to place a great emphasis on whether or not Silas and the men before, Daniel especially, we liked Daniel. He was
Right,
a
nothing
nice
wrong
fella.
with him.
but they have to buy into the ghosts,
right,
100%, or she can't buy into them.
Right.
And Silas is a rationalist, isn't he?
Right. No, ghosts sound crazy. Clearly, ghosts sound crazy. Right. And he is really thrown by that, as I think all of us would be if the person we thought we were falling in love with suddenly said, "So, I saw a 12th century girl sitting in my kitchen yesterday."
Yes.
And I think Wren in some ways looks for outs, looks for ways to dismiss people, looks for reasons to be mad at Silas and to sort of wall him off. I did love, you mentioned research earlier. I'd never been to New Mexico before I chose to write the book there, and found some wonderful, talented archaeologists who took me on a dig and walked me through what I was learning, both in terms of sort of technique but also just their own stories of their experiences, decades in the field. And
well, your book is a little guidebook on how to do a dig. I mean,
yeah,
really,
you read it, you can go dig up dead
careful with
people,
the pickaxe,
no
lay out the strings, get your little brushes.
Right. Yeah, I like the details. I like the the sensory part of it. But archaeologist after archaeologist had stories about some unexplained thing on the field. They are scientists. They are very rational, and yet to a person, everyone had some story of something that, a pine limb that fell in front of them when there were no pine trees around, or a swarm of bees that came out when they when they uncovered an infant body. But there is something about, I think, uncovering the dead.
They are working in graveyards.
Right.
They're very old graveyards, but they're still human remains underground.
Right. Right.
And if there are going to be spirits anywhere, as in Poltergeist, they're going to be in graveyards.
Right. No, that's where they should stay. That's clearly that's where we expect to find them. But I do like that there's this sort of negative part with Wren of what is maybe an unhealthy tie to the past, but also a kind of magic to it that I think the ghost,
Right.
that there is, again, I think with real archaeologists, not this clear-cut sense of ghost, but a sense that you are a part of something that is bigger than you, and that is, in whatever way you define that, a spiritual thing.
There is a spiritual dimension to it. It's not just bits of clay and pottery. Your second novel appeared a number of years after your first one, which is perfectly respectable. William Styron wrote a book every 7 years, so you're
I'll try to do better
excellent.
than that.
But you've already finished the third one, and you've just mentioned to me we only have a minute left, but your third book is about two old ladies?
Yes, so it's different again. It is set at some point in the future and follows two 90-year-old women as they sort of face life in their 90s, and then tells the story of their friendship back through their 20s. So about a good bit of the book is told through flashbacks, but about their relationships and sort of the way they are facing the last few years of their life, and how they want to make the most of it.
And they're retired to Florida, these two old
They're
ladies.
retired. Where else would you retire, of course?
But they were Alabama.
Yes, they were Alabamians for the best. They're all through their 80s. Only at the end of their 80s were they driven to Florida.
And this book is done and seeking a home. And
Yes, it is done and seeking a home.
And you've written a children's book as well.
I have a book which is, in theory, called The Hidden Summer, coming out. It's a middle grade book next summer, which is about two girls who run away to what the Highland Golf Course in Birmingham would be like if it were both abandoned for 20 years and had a nine-hole putt-putt course attached.
Oh,
That's
all right.
where I would want to run away to if I were going to run away. A putt-putt course would be right up there.
Men do it once a week. They run away to the golf course. Well, it sounds as if productivity is increasing. If book number 3 is finished and book number 4 is underway and the children's book is done. Well, as I'm happy to say to most guests, I'm looking forward to the next one. And when you publish the novel about the two old ladies in Florida, I'll read it, and I hope we can sit down and have a talk about it.
I hope so. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for coming. It's been a pleasure.